What's going on, guys? It's Jack with Jack Banks MMA, and we're getting into the early betting ideas for UFC 281. It's going to be a big one. See you in a bit. All right, so there's a lot of, I believe, 14 fights on this card. There's a lot of competitive fights, I believe, and some underdogs, I think, that have some value, as well as some over-under, fight goes to decision, doesn't go to decision plays that I think will make sense depending on where the odds come out. So like we've been doing, we're going to start off with the main event, which is Israel Adesanya taking on Alex Pereira. I mean, guys, this is the matchup the UFC has wanted. I think us fans have wanted for a couple of years now, or I guess it's been a year, right? Since Pereira made his debut in the UFC, which is pretty insane. I thought it was a couple of years, but now I'm realizing he really made his debut at the last Madison Square Garden event against Andreas Michailidis. So it's been a fast rise for Pereira, and that was obviously intentional by the UFC. They didn't really have him go up against any wrestlers on his ascent to the top. And they won that matchup, and now it's here, and I think we all wanted it as well. Obviously, most people know the backstory, but if you don't, you know, Pereira and Adesanya had fought twice in kickboxing, and Pereira won both fights. Now, he won one via decision and the other via knockout. If you went and watched the fight, though, where Pereira won via knockout, if it was an MMA fight, Adesanya would have won the fight before that knockout took place. He had knocked down Pereira earlier, and in the UFC, you know, you don't get that 10 count. So I really do believe Adesanya would have finished Pereira, but it doesn't matter because under the rules of kickboxing, he was able to get those 10 seconds and come back and get that finish with his left hook. So this fight is, I think it's a great fight as a fan. As a bettor, I'm having a tough time finding a clear angle. Like, I'm thinking, okay, in my head, I'm like, all right, I think this fight doesn't go to decision, but I can also see a world where it absolutely does. And at the same time, you know, I think Adesanya is likely to win, but at minus 180 or minus 170, depending on where you're looking, like, I think that's a bit steep in this matchup against Pereira. This is the most competitive an Adesanya line has been in quite some time. Most of the time, he's been at minus 300 or higher. So the fact that he's at minus 170 actually says quite a bit about where the odds makers see this fight. For me, I'm going to pass, but I think, you know, you could really play anything in this fight, and I think you could justify it. You could play Adesanya to win. I think it makes sense. You could play Pereira to win. I think that makes sense. Goes decision, doesn't go decision. That's why for me, I'm going to pass. I'm just going to enjoy it. I think it's going to be a fantastic fight. Now, moving down from the top of the card, there's Carla Esparza taking on Weili Zhang. And I think this is a much closer fight than people are giving it credit for. I'll just kind of let the cat out the bag right off the top here. I think Esparza has value as an underdog. I really do. I think the line is off. I think her wrestling is an equalizer. Could I look really stupid come fight night? 100%. 100%. Weili Zhang could stuff all the takedowns, and this could be over in the first round or early in the second. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Carla Esparza is going to be able to get some takedowns, get some control time on the mat, and make this an ugly fight. And that's what she's really good at. She's really good at that. She knows her style. She plays to her game plan. And I know a lot of people are saying, you know, Weili was taken down by Rose, but she wasn't expecting it. And I totally get that. I totally understand that. But what I can't give her credit for is the fact that she stayed on her back for minutes upon minutes in multiple rounds. And if that's happening against Rose Namajunas, That's certainly going to happen against Carla Esparza if she can get you to the ground. So that's the question. Can she get the takedowns? It seemed like some of the takedowns against Rose also were later in the fight, to give Weili some credit here. So, that is part of it. But I do think Esparza can get the takedowns early. I really do. And so at where the odds are right now, I'm going to have to play a bit on Esparza. I had it capped Weili as the favorite, but more as like a minus 130 favorite than minus 200 or so, where I think she's at now. So I'm going to personally skip over the Dustin Poirier-Michael Chandler fight. I think it's a fun fight, but not one that I'm going to be betting on. I totally understand people betting Poirier, but I just think it's a weird time in both their careers. Poirier has definitely fought the better competition, in my opinion. But I don't know. It's a weird fight to me in terms of betting, but I certainly understand if you're on Poirier money line. So I'm not exactly sure what the correct order is at this point, but for me, I have Dominic Reyes and Ryan Spann. The only way I think to play this fight, in terms of value, and we're gonna have to see where the line comes out at, is that this fight doesn't go the distance. I don't see it going the distance. The only thing that's giving me a little bit of pause is that Reyes is coming off of a lengthy absence outside of the octagon, and he's on a 3-fight losing streak rather. So maybe he'll be a little more reserved in this fight, trying to look for a safer win, right? But both guys historically don't go to decisions in the UFC or out of the UFC, especially for Dominic Reyes. So I have it capped as minus 180 just because of the little bit of uncertainty on the Reyes side. But I do think, if you can get good value there, I think it's worth a play for sure. Next up for me is going to be Frankie Edgar taking on Chris Gutierrez. And similar to the Weili Zhang Carla Esparza fight, I do think there's value on Frankie Edgar here, but not quite as much value as I saw on Carla Esparza. I think Frankie should be the underdog, but I think, it should be at like plus 125 versus right now I think he's like plus 160, plus 150 or something. So I think there's a little bit of value on Edgar. And the same reason comes is in this fight with Chris Gutierrez as it was in the Weili Zhang fight, which is that I've seen Chris Gutierrez controlled on the mat for lengthy periods of time. Now, the one thing I will say about Chris Gutierrez is it tends to be early in the fights. Like, he gets stronger as the fights go on. For whatever reason, he's been a slow starter. We saw it in the Geraldo de Freitas fight, where that was a little bit of a combination of not really throwing on the feet as well as giving up a takedown near the end of the first round. And then obviously the Cody Durden fight, where he was 10-8'd in the first round. He got his back taken. He really didn't have a sense of urgency to get to his feet. He did clearly win rounds 2 and rounds 3 on the feet and looked really good and stuffed some takedowns. But also, Cody Durden was coming in on like a week's notice or something like that. So his cardio wasn't great for that fight. He seemed to gas out after the first round, understandably so. So I really still have some questions about Gutierrez's ability to deal with wrestlers, to really get up. And I just think there's a world where he drops around. And I think if he's dropping around at minus 180, I think the value's on Edgar. Like, I just think he can get it done. Plus, if you go back and watch the Marlon Vera fight, like, Edgar clearly wins round 1. Round 2 is very close. I thought Chito Vera won round 2, but you can make the argument that Frankie won round 2. And so, therefore, if he doesn't get finished late in the third round there, he had a chance going into the scorecards. And so, my question is, is Chris Gutierrez better than Marlon Vera? I don't think so, but we're going to find out. And so I do think there is some value in Frankie Edgar in this spot. Now I'm going to skip around to some of the other fights here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this fight is on the main card, maybe on the prelims, but Erin Blanchfield taking on Molly McCann. Again, I understand why people are on Erin Blanchfield, but I think there's value on Molly McCann here. I just think at plus 300, it's out of whack. Like, Erin Blanchfield's really good. I get it. She's a phenomenal grappler. Molly McCann has struggled with that aspect of fighting in the past. 100%. Totally understand that. But Erin Blanchfield's last fight against J.J. Aldridge didn't give me a ton of confidence going into this next fight against Molly McCann. And McCann's grappling has improved. Now, do I think McCann should be the favorite? No, absolutely not. I am not going that far here. But do I think Molly McCann should be plus 300? No, like absolutely not. So with that being said, again, I think the value is on the McCann side here. On the money line, I think if you can get her, I mean, right now she's plus 300, so I think I would play it. To be honest, I'm going to look to play it over the next week. I just think there's too much value. I had Blanchfield as closer to minus 175 just because I do think that the grappling has improved with Molly McCann. And I think Blanchfield showed in her last fight she's willing to kind of trade on the feet for a bit. But I don't think she's going to be as willing in this fight. So we'll see. This could end up being, 30-27 Blanchfield. In that case, I do think, Blanchfield via decision makes sense. I don't think she's getting a finish over Molly McCann here, but we will find out. So, again, I think there's some value on McCann on the money line here. Now, to some fights on the prelim, which I have some confidence in. The first one is going to be Mike Trisano taking on Sung Woo Choi. Now, I think this is number one, this is a fight where I think the loser could be cut from the UFC. So there's a lot on the line for both guys. They're coming in on losing streaks here. And I think Choi is definitely at this point the guy who most people still consider to be, I guess, a prospect, right? Like, Trisano had his run, and he won the Ultimate Fighter, but I think his inactivity kind of faded whatever shine he did have at the time. And now I think, Choi, he's kind of faded as well, losing to Caceres, losing to Culibao in the way he did, where he was outstruck. And he won the third round, but it was with his grappling. So, to me, this fight should be a pick'em. I don't think either fighter has a tremendous advantage in any aspect here. And I just think it should be a pick'em. So with that being said, I think there's value on Trisano as the underdog in this fight. I also feel confident that this fight will go to decision. It's a little bit sketchy, but I do think neither one of these guys is all that likely. Choi could land a big power shot and finish Trisano, as we just saw in his last fight against Almeida. But Trisano's shown in the past he's got a decent chin. And I don't know. I just don't see Choi getting the finish here. On the flip side, I don't see it from Trisano either. I think Choi really struggled with Culibao's speed, and I don't think Trisano has that same level of speed. I just really think this fight is likely to go to a decision. I have it capped as minus 150. That's where my level of confidence is on that fight. Next up is going to be Carlos Ulberg taking on Nikolai Negumereanu. Now, I must admit, I have had a poor read on Carlos Ulberg in his UFC run. I thought he would win his debut, which he was winning until he lost rather convincingly against Kennedy and Nzechukwu. And then his next fight, he fought, who was it? Fabio Charant. In that fight, I did pick him to win. He did win, but it was certainly not impressive. Certainly not impressive. It was a lot of pitter-patter from the outside. Didn't really want to engage much. So the next fight, I thought, okay, Tufan Nchukwi, he's going to come in. He's going to give him some problems. Completely wrong about that one. Ulberg looked fantastic in that fight. So, with that being said, guys, I'm 1 for 3 on my Ulberg picks. I think Ulberg gets the job done, though, in this one. I think it's a a favorable matchup because of the striking. I think that Negumereanu knows he needs to close the distance to get inside, and Olberg is fantastic in that style of fight. We've seen a couple of times here. But also, I'm going out on a limb a little bit and just relying on the City Kickboxing counter wrestling. You know, they just have a lot of guys who seem to be very good at it. From Adesanya to Kai Kara-France to even Brad Riddell. Like, it seems to be that gym has done a very good job at preparing their fighters to not be taken down. And so I'm going out on a bit of a limb because I haven't seen it with Olberg. And I think he's worth a minus 150 ticket. But again, it's a bit of projection based off the gym. And there's definitely a world where Negumereanu is able to get some takedowns, mix in some clinch work, make this an ugly fight, and win a decision, I think, like 29-28 or even 30-27. Really ugly. Last fight for me, actually two more fights for me. Andre Petroski taking on Wellington Turman. I think Petroski deserves to be the favorite, minus 175 or so. I think the books have him around there, maybe a little higher, minus 190, minus 200. I think we've seen. I think we've come around on Petroski. He shouldn't have been. A lot of people thought he shouldn't have been as big of an underdog against Nick Maximov. Now, did many people think he'd get the finish as quickly as he did? I don't think so, but a lot of people knew that line was off. Now, Wellington Turman hasn't shown me a lot in his UFC career. Yes, he was able to get the finish against Serkinov, but that was a rocky fight up until he was able to get the finish. He did have some good moments in the first round, but after the first, I would say half of the first round, until he got that finish, Serkinov was really dominating the fight, which gives me a little bit of pause in terms of, if I were to play Turman. So that's why I think Petroski is deservedly a favorite. But based off of their careers here, I do think it is likely that this fight doesn't go to decision. Petroski really doesn't go to decisions at all. I don't think he's been to a decision, actually. And Turman, he's been to a few more at the UFC, but I just think this fight is going to be a high-paced grappling affair, and somebody's getting submitted or, ground and pound TKO from Petroski I could see as well. I'm feeling like, minus 200 fight doesn't go to decision here makes sense. So could be a nice parlay piece, I feel. And the last fight, another underdog I like, but certainly this fight doesn't go to decision, is going to be Adman Azatar, I believe that's how you say it, versus Matt Frevola. This fight was supposed to happen at UFC Fight Island, and then Azatar got caught, whatever he was doing, like really shady stuff. And then they released him, now he's back. So now Frevola has a chance to get his revenge, because he ended up having to fight Arman Tsarukyan, which I'm sure he's not very happy about. And so this comes down to whether Frevola can get the takedowns and win, kind of an ugly fight, I think, is what he's going to need to do, because his chin is really worrisome. And can he avoid the power of Adman, I'm going to call him, because he's got tremendous power in his hands. I think Frevola could be in trouble, especially round one. So I do think it makes sense to play Azatar round one in this matchup. So let me know what you guys think of some of my predictions, my bets here, my early betting ideas for UFC 281. One last thing I forgot to mention earlier, guys. I have a partnership with BetUS rather. So if you guys want to sign up, I have the link in my Instagram bio, Jack Banks MMA. You guys get a 125% bonus if you guys are betting. I think it's a great opportunity for you guys, and it helps support the channel. So with that being said, guys, I'll see you guys next week. UFC 281 should be a ton of fun. See you guys. Peace.